Venezuela sits on the largest proven oil reserves in the world, larger than Saudi Arabia, larger than Iraq. Over 300 billion barrels of crude oil buried beneath the jungles and coastal plains of a nation the size of Texas and Oklahoma combined. Yet for the past 25 years, this nation has been sliding into an abyss of economic collapse, political dictatorship, and human suffering. And the United States has watched this descent with an intensity that goes far beyond humanitarian concern. To understand why America cannot and will not let Venezuela go, you must look beyond the headlines about democracy and human rights. This is a story about oil, geography, and the Monroe Doctrine. If you are sensing this reveals the hidden forces behind regime change operations, hit that subscribe button now, because what is really happening in Venezuela will shock you. The story begins with Hugo Chavez. In 1998, a charismatic former military officer won the presidency in a landslide. He promised to overthrow the corrupt elite and redistribute the nation's oil wealth to the poor. Upon taking office, Chavez set about dismantling the old order. He rewrote the Constitution. He removed term limits. He concentrated power in his own hands. But his most dramatic shifts were on the international stage. Chavez viewed the United States not as a partner, but as an imperialist predator. He sought to build a coalition of anti-American states to challenge Washington's dominance in the hemisphere. He forged a deep strategic alliance with Cuba, sending 100,000 barrels of oil a day to Havana to prop up the Castro regime. He traveled to Baghdad to meet Saddam Hussein, breaking the international isolation of the Iraqi regime. He courted Iran, inviting the Islamic Republic to invest in Venezuela and establishing direct flights between Caracas and Tehran. He bought billions of dollars of weapons from Russia, replacing American hardware with Sukhoi jets and Kalashnikov rifles. He opened the doors to China, allowing Beijing to gain a strategic foothold in South American energy. Under Chavez, Venezuela became a hub for global anti-Americanism. Before we reveal why this threatens U.S. national security, smash that like button if you are realizing this is about more than oil. The United States watched with growing alarm as its former ally transformed into a beachhead for its rivals. Relations deteriorated rapidly. The U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration was kicked out, accused of spying. Sanctions were imposed. Diplomatic rhetoric became hostile. Chavez famously stood at the United Nations podium and called President George W. Bush the devil, claiming he could still smell the sulfur. Despite political hostility, the economic relationship survived because the United States still needed Venezuelan heavy crude for its refineries and Venezuela needed American cash. But the seeds of collapse were being sown. Chavez used oil windfalls to fund massive social programs and buy regional influence. But he failed to invest in the oil industry itself. He fired thousands of experienced engineers from the state oil company PDVSA, replacing them with political loyalists. Production began to decline even as prices soared. When Hugo Chavez died of cancer in 2013, he left behind a country that was politically polarized and economically fragile. He handpicked his successor, Nicolas Maduro, a former bus driver who had served as foreign minister. Maduro inherited the presidency, but not Chavez's charisma or the high oil prices. Almost immediately, the global oil market collapsed. The price of crude plummeted and the Venezuelan economy went into free fall. The economic implosion under Maduro is one of the worst in modern history outside of wartime. GDP contracted by 80%. Hyperinflation rendered the currency worthless. The minimum wage dropped to a few dollars a month. Starvation became commonplace. The health system collapsed. Millions of Venezuelans fled the country, creating a refugee crisis that overwhelmed the region. As the economy died, the criminality of the regime grew. Denied access to international financial markets due to U.S. sanctions, the Maduro government turned to illicit revenue streams. The United States accused Maduro and his inner circle of turning Venezuela into a narco state. High-ranking officials and military generals allegedly formed the Cartel of the Suns, trafficking hundreds of tons of cocaine from Colombia through Venezuela to the United States and Europe. The regime also turned to illegal gold mining in the Amazon, destroying vast swaths of rainforest. But here is why the United States cannot walk away. Venezuela's location is strategic. It sits at the gateway to the Caribbean, controlling access to crucial shipping lanes. Its oil reserves, if revitalized, could reshape global energy markets and further isolate Russia and Iran. But more importantly, the presence of Russian and Iranian allies in America's backyard is deemed an unacceptable threat to national security. The flow of drugs and migrants from Venezuela is seen as a direct attack on the U.S. homeland. The Monroe Doctrine, which asserts the primacy of the United States in the Western Hemisphere, has been dusted off and reinvigorated. The message is clear. No hostile power will be allowed to establish a permanent foothold in Latin America. Venezuela under Maduro became exactly that, a platform for Russian military advisors, Chinese intelligence operations, Iranian financial networks, and Cuban security services. It became a safe haven for guerrilla groups like the ELN and FARC dissidents, who use Venezuelan territory to traffic drugs and weapons. For American strategists, allowing this to continue is not an option. The calculation is simple. Either Venezuela is brought back into the Western sphere of influence, or it becomes a permanent threat requiring constant military vigilance. The economic reconstruction of Venezuela offers massive potential. The oil infrastructure is currently in ruins. Refineries are rusted, pipelines leak, but it will take tens of billions of dollars and years of work to restore production. However, in a stable environment with rule of law, Western energy majors would rush back in. ExxonMobil, Chevron, and others have the capital and expertise to revive the sector. A revitalized Venezuelan oil industry would be a massive boon for global energy security. It would provide an alternative to Middle Eastern oil. It would counter Russian and Iranian influence in energy markets. It would stabilize prices and reduce dependence on hostile regimes. But beyond oil, there is the refugee crisis. The collapse of Venezuela has already driven nearly 8 million people out of the country. This has destabilized neighboring nations like Colombia and Brazil. It has sent waves of migrants toward the U.S. southern border, creating a political crisis. The United States has determined that the only way to stop the flow is to fix Venezuela at the source. Regime change, whether through military operation, covert action, or diplomatic pressure, has become the preferred solution. The return of the Monroe Doctrine signals a new era of American interventionism in the hemisphere. It is a warning to other regimes that feel protected by distance or alliances. The long arm of the United States can reach into the most fortified capitals when the political will exists. Venezuela is not just another country in crisis. It is a test case for American power in the 21st century. It is a battleground between Western influence and the rising multipolar world of Russia, China, and Iran. The outcome will determine whether the United States can still enforce its will in its own hemisphere, or whether the era of unchallenged American dominance is ending. The stakes are existential. The resources are invaluable. The geography is irreplaceable. That is the real reason America cannot let Venezuela go. If this revealed the hidden geopolitical forces shaping our world, subscribe. Hit that like button and let me know in the comments. Should the U.S. intervene in Venezuela or respect sovereignty? Join us as we uncover the strategic calculations behind global conflicts. Thank you for watching.